One of the things that we are often asked in a game of chess is, when do we sacrifice our queen for 3 pieces? Or when do we sacrifice our queen for 2 rooks and a pawn? So according to our material chart, a queen for 3 pieces, 9 and 9, that's even. A queen for 2 rooks, if you can get the 2 rooks, that's worth 10. And you get a pawn, that's worth 10, so that's a good trade, or an even trade. But it's not that simple. Really, and I try to emphasize this as much as I can, it's really not important what comes off the board. It's what stays on the board. You know, you can enjoy the fact you're a rook up. Look at that rook. But if you're getting checkmated, you're not having much joy out of being a rook ahead. So while we can use the material table as a helpful guide to understanding what's going on, in truth, we really should be focused on what's left on the board. And when our focus is there, what we really want or need, if we're the player who's given up the queen, we need active pieces or active rooks. It's really that simple. If our pieces are not active, if our rooks are not active, we're in trouble. That was not a good queen trade for us. Let's just give a few examples. Okay. The first example comes from a very standard Grunfeld defense. Very standard Grunfeld defense. I think they even call this the Moscow variation or something like that. It goes like this. Queen b3 takes, queen takes, castles. e4, I believe, a6. Now this position actually was made famous by none other than Vasily Smyslov. I think Vasily Smyslov was really, really underestimated as a world champion. All of these world champions have greatness, but in truth, he was really overshadowed by the fact that after he defeated Smyslov, he lost, after Smyslov defeated Botvinnik, he lost the return match. It was like Botvinnik had this long, long history as world champion, and Botvinnik is referred to as the patriarch of the Soviet Chess Federation. But look at their games together. I think I'm in the right neighborhood. They played 118 games over world championship matches, world championship events, Soviet events, and Smyslov was like +3. Had a plus score against Botvinnik. He keeps the championship title for 1 year. Botvinnik keeps it for 17, or how many years he did, and everybody praises the hell out of Botvinnik. Smyslov had this very, very interesting idea. The idea of knight comes back was to give this bishop a view of the board, and after, for example, bishop e3, Smyslov made this position quite famous, playing numerous games. In modern chess, or chess of today, a7, a6 has been a very popular move by black. e5, b5, queen b3. Okay? Queen b3. Okay, at first sight, it does appear that black's in a bit of a jam. He's not a happy camper. The knight has to move. The knight on f6 has to move. If it moves to, let's say, gh5, well, it's just on the rim, it's dim. It's out of the game. If it moves to, say, g4, well, that's not such a great square either. And after a move like h3, the knight ends up being misplaced once again on the side of the board. So by far, and what black players have, oh, pardon me, let me just say knight b d7. after knight bd7, there's this very nasty move e7, e6. This puts a lot of pressure on black's position once more, because we can see, for example, after a move like takes, knight g5, white is going to win his pawn back on e6 and have a very nice attack. So by far, the theoreticians of the world have chosen the move bishop e6. So this really puts the question to white. Well, what are you going to do about your queen? What are you going to do about your queen? If white moves his queen back to c2, well, this is very nice from black's point of view, because now black's knight has an excellent square in the middle of the board, and white may have regrets that he advanced his center pawns prematurely. So you have to imagine yourself sitting on the white side of the situation for a moment, and you say, if I move my queen, queen c2, knight d5, black stands very well. So let me capture this knight. I assume that he will capture my queen. I will capture this bishop, threatening the threatening the rook. He'll capture my pawn, and I will recapture the bishop. So at the end of all of these trades, we've got a situation of two bishops and a knight, 3 pieces, against a queen, but black also has won a pawn. So on the strict material count tables, black's ahead. Okay? But as we start to look at the position, and Grandmaster practice has shown that this position is actually favorable for white. Much of the reason has to do, strangely enough, with black's king. That black's king, even though it doesn't look really vulnerable at the moment, it ends up being quite vulnerable as it turns out. So let's imagine, just for argument's sake, we're just going to imagine that white's threatening to play the move bishop takes b5, thanks to the pin against the rook on a8. Let's imagine that, therefore, black develops his knight, so that his rook is protected by the queen, and bishop takes b5 is off the board, and at the same time we have ideas like knight takes d4. Okay, pawn on d4 is attacked. Let us play bishop e3, defending the pawn. Okay, still it's not quite visible. It's not quite visible yet, but if we imagine that the pawn comes to d5, followed by the bishop coming to d4, we start to understand that black's king has a chance of being vulnerable. So let's play the move knight b4. We're threatening knight c2 check. We defend the threat. And I believe that a number of Grandmaster games have gone in this position. Now, we can talk about plans for a moment. If I were white, I'd really like to play the move h4, h5, takes on g6, takes on g6, bishop h6, check, and take a rook. Also, if I was white, I would really like to play the move knight e5, bishop e2, castles, and play bishop f3, and control the center. Most players, if I've got this right, play the move knight d5 here. White plays bishop g5. And this is where you start to get a little bit concerned about what's going on with your king. If you end up playing a move like f7, f6 for just a moment, I'll retreat with my bishop. It's very hard to see how black, is going to develop his game. In white's mind, he wants to play the move bishop g3 with tactics like knight takes d5 and rook takes c7. He wants to play after bishop g3 moves like bishop d3, bishop e4. In other words, it's very easy to see that white's pieces are getting good squares. So this sacrifice of the queen, black players have been practice has discouraged them from it. We go back. We do another one. e4, new variation. d6, we're going to go into a perk for a moment. g3, knight here, bishop here, bishop here. How does this go? Bishop c4. Yeah, it's castles, queen e2, bishop g4. I think I'm getting it. Push. I think I'm getting it. Something like this, 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 this. This is very easy to see that white is doing extremely well from the material count. Yeah? He's going to end up having a rook, a knight, and a bishop. So the line that I'm trying to get goes like bishop c4, bishop g4. Queen, yeah, bishop g4, new variation, queen e2, knight c6, d4, takes, 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 takes. Come on, you can do it. Here. Okay. And I think I'm trying to play knight takes e2. Doesn't matter. Or does it matter? Yeah, I think it does matter. I apologize. So bishop takes e2. New variation. Rook takes here. Okay. So here we have 3 pieces for the queen and 2 pawns. In the other variation, we had just a pawn. And once again, the practice has shown that what came off the board isn't as critical as what stays on the board. It turns out that even though it looks like black's position is pretty solid, white's play is extremely fast. In this position, he plays bishop h6, attacks the rook, castles, queen d7, rook here, I believe, castles, I think we do something like this. And it's not at all clear what black is going to do against, I mean, it's almost like every time he moves one of his pawns. For example, if black were to move one of his pawns here, he immediately gives an outpost for, we could play bishop here, or more concretely, we could go knight e4 to f6. So this is an example where your queen for 2 pawns, and again, the practice has shown that it's favorable for the pieces. Now let's go back a moment to another sacrifice. I always say that David Bronstein, he's the root of all evil. I mean, the guy's just like amazing. You go outside to our chess library there, you go through the Encyclopedia of Chess Openings, some massive 5-tome volume of openings. You just like select a random volume, you select random pages. It's almost for sure ideas of Bronstein are going to be in the pages. So David Bronstein's, I'm sure in previous lectures I've mentioned this, I was black against Garry Kasparov, and I chose one of David Bronstein's ideas. Garry played a samish against me, and I sacrificed my queen for 2 bishops. This is David Bronstein's idea. So I won a pawn, and after queen here, I took a bishop. I took a bishop. Threats of knight g2 and knight c2 check are in the air. King e2, knight takes. So I sacrificed my queen for 2 bishops and 2 pawns. In this position, it's considered, and I believe rightfully so, that white has an advantage because what has stayed on the board is a position where black's pieces are not active like they were in those previous examples. Gary played rook here. I played knight here. Gary played the standard knight h3. I played, what did I play? Help, help. f6, yay. Knight here. I played bishop d7. He played, oops, no, he didn't do that. No. I played f6. He played knight here. Very good move. New variation, new main line. Knight here. These, up to this moment, this stuff was all standard. And I played a novelty knight c8, which was very, very, very good. And the game eventually ended in a draw. But I prefer the queen here, principally for 2 reasons. I prefer the queen in this position principally for 2 reasons. First of all, this bishop is passive. Second of all, this knight on a6 is not in the game. But I still made a draw. We go back, and this was, I remember when I first saw this, this was like an amazing game. Control flip for a second. Hecht. He's black. He's white. Michael Tull is black. We have, yeah, I think it was another. Was it a same-ish? Yeah, I believe this was a same-ish. Bishop e3. New variation. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Cancel. f3, castles, bishop e3. Michael Tull played c5. This is a very complicated theoretical discussion after pawn takes, queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes c5. White wins a pawn, but it's tons of complex variations after knight c6, knight d5, e6. Numerous games have been shown, and I think the final word was a game between Lev Albert as white and Garry Kasparov as black. And Gary won with black, and capturing the pawn is frowned upon, let's just say. Knight ge2, standard move. Knight c6, all standard moves. All of these moves are standard moves. Castles. a6, I believe. King b1, rook here. So we get the standard position, and it's white to play. And Hecht played this move, knight d5, against Michael Tull. And Tull came up with a concept that was just so cool. I just thought that this was really, really great. Tull captured here, queen takes, and of course Hecht had literally written on his score sheet, knight takes a5. I mean, he had anticipated takes and takes. And he thought, well, we're going to get into an ending where, you know, there's no attack against white's king and white has more space in the center. He was looking forward to a fine position. And Tull captured. Tull captured the piece instead, sacrificing his queen for 2 pieces. Then after the queen dropped back to e1, Tal played either b5 or knight takes. And Tal did not take the rook. Tal played either, he took this, or I think he actually even went b5. And this was a typical Michael Tal combination. Yeah, I think he played b5. So, you know, there's Hecht with these, with, you know, this queen, you know, for 2 pieces, and he's looking at the queen and the 2 pieces off the board. But look at what remains on the board. Even though there's no pawns at this moment in Black's pocket, so to speak, it's really, really clear that this bishop on g7, this rook on b8, this knight, which I do, and I have it in my mind that this knight ended up going to c4, faulty memory, gray matter, and all that good stuff. Or no, maybe it was something like rook c1, b takes c4, something like this. And we see that Black is having all the fun. I mean, Black is the one in charge here, and of course you cannot capture this pawn on c5 or move your pawn to d5, because rook takes b2 check is an absolute disaster. So in this case, it was a case of the 2 pieces actually doing a lot of damage to White's position, and Tal won a very, very beautiful game. And it made a very powerful impression on me when I first saw this game, just because, you know, geez, all you're getting is a knight and bishop for your queen. But again, it's not what you're getting, it's what you got on the board. And what's on the board is a very nice position for Black. Just to that note, I'm sure I've shown this game, or you're at least familiar with the game. Perhaps some of you are not. And it's just a fun game, okay? So the game I'm about to show you is called Dreams and Nightmares. Dreams and Nightmares. Dreams and Nightmares. Well, what's that? So what's the dream? The dream. The dream is you have the amateur player, B player, A player, doesn't matter, plays in the big tournament. First round, he gets paired up. And he's playing on board 1. You know, that nice little area where all the ropes are on, you know. He's playing on board 1 against the big Grandmaster. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And his dream is, man, he's going to play the game of his life, win a brilliantly, upset the Grandmaster, and, you know, that's it. You know, he's got drinks for the rest of his life, you know, like, okay. Nice dream. Flip side of that coin is the nightmare. There's the Grandmaster, right? He's playing board 1 against some very low-rated player. Guy comes in and beats the snot out of him. Ah! You know, you lose 500 gazillion rating points, you know. I mean, you know, your life and career is over. I mean, that's the nightmare. Okay, that's the setup. I'm playing in a tournament that it's like 3 rounds on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. First game starts at 10 o'clock. I'm a half an hour driving from the playing home, set my alarm, 8 o'clock in the morning. About 9:55, my eyes wake up. The alarm didn't go off. Ah, panic, 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 panic. So now, instead of, you know, calling the organizer and explaining my predicament, taking a half point by whatever, you know, I scramble. Boy, I'm brushing my teeth, rushing downstairs, driving like a maniac. And the time control was something like 40 moves in 90 minutes, followed by half an hour or something like that for the rest of the game. By the time I fly into the tournament hall, I'm like 50 minutes late. 50, 50. I'm 50 minutes late, and I'm playing against Michael Darby. And Michael is, you know, like he's got his opening move on the board, and I'm I apologize. I explained the situation. Says no problem, just so long as I don't have to reset your clock. You know what I mean? Before now, in those days, I had a universal panacea. I mean, this move d7, d6. It was a cure-all. You could play it against everything that white opens up. It's essentially a early fianchetto with the king's bishop. c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4. Now, literally in my career, I've probably had this position 1,000 times in tournament chess. 1,000. Play e5. Now, of course, my opponent can capture on e5. I capture. He trades queens. I've played that ending forever, and I've done very well. My opponent played, in those days, what was considered the most standard moves, bishop e3. I played knight c6, and he played knight ge2. Now, I probably had this position in my career about 400 times, you know, like, okay. And this is a really cool move for black. At least I liked it a lot. Like if I played a standard move, knight f6, and they played an f3, and I played castles, the position's like a same-ish. Very, very normal, pardon me, same-ish variation. I played the move knight h6, okay? Now I really like this move very much. This is a very, very cool move. In the first place, I want to jump to g4 to harass this bishop. In the second case, like most King's Indians, I want to play the move f5. With my knight on h6, instead of being in front of the pawn, it's actually supporting the pawn advance f5. f3, f5. And again, I probably had this position about 50 times in my chess career. And at that time, everybody knew that this move, queen d2, is a mistake. That is to say, in the books it was written a question mark, and that the book suggested that white has to play the move d5, knight e7, and only now queen d2, and then knight f7. And we've got a kind of a funky King's Indian where I've got an early f5, and white still has to solve what he's going to do in terms of development. Okay, but oh, I must say at this point too that my opponent was playing at a steady pace, like a minute, minute and a half per move, where I was playing nearly instantly and scrambling to get a cup of coffee, right? So he just thought about this position. A few minutes, he played queen d2, and I was very, very happy, of course, because now I instantly played the refutation. This is the known refutation of queen d2. I mean, again, queen d2 question mark, f5 takes e4, black is better. Black is better. How cool is that? Black's better. Instantly, I'm off the hook, my opponent's thinking. And what's the point? Of course the point is, you cannot take my knight. If you take my knight, I have this nasty little check, and I recover the bishop. Wonderful. But here's the cool point. What about bishop g5? Ooh, bishop g5. If the queen moves, then I'll take the knight. There's no queen check. If the knight blocks the attack of the bishop, I'll take the knight, and there's no queen check. Doesn't white win a piece? No. No, white doesn't win a piece because black has this really cute little move, e3. Okay. Cutting the electricity, the current between the queen and the bishop. You can't take my queen, I'll take your queen with check, and I'll recapture your bishop. If you capture this pawn, that was the move I needed. You brought your queen into the range of the knight, and if you take my queen now, I'll take your queen and I'll have a nasty threat of check. If you move your queen, queen d2. I'll move my queen, and thanks to the coordinated efforts of this knight, this pawn, this bishop, I'm going to win control over the d4 square. And again, the books give all of this, and they say black's better, and so forth and so on. They also say that black is better, and I believe them, that if you capture this pawn, I'll capture your pawn, and a knight goes to g4, and it ends up on this very, very comfortable outpost on e5. Black's better, I'll agree. So that leaves the last choice for white is knight takes e4. After knight takes e4, the idea for black is knight f5, bishop g5, queen d7. This is all given in the books, by the way. d5, knight here, takes, check, here, takes, castles. And the idea is that this bishop is under attack. If the bishop were to retreat, let's just pick a spot, doesn't matter, bishop h4, black has this great rook takes f3. And thanks to the fact that after gf, knight takes, forks your king and queen, black is doing excellent, simply excellent. So there I was, looking forward to a fast victory and forget about my early morning panic, when my opponent played d5 against me. New variation, this one. So I'm thinking to myself, well, what's that? Like, that's not in your list of options, you know. You got to go. Didn't you read my book? I mean, you're not supposed to play d5. Well, I started to think, and I quickly realized, well, obviously I can't move my knight. He takes my knight, and I don't have this queen h4 check because my knight's in my way. So obviously I can't move my knight to e7. I can't move my knight to d4 because white would simply capture everything, and at the end of the day, at the end of the variation, castles, knight takes e4, knight f5, queen drops back, and what's that? I'm a pawn down. I don't see any compensation here whatsoever for black. White is ready to castle, put his bishop on d3, complete development. I'm a pawn down, and my king is actually even a little bit vulnerable. So obviously, in this position, my knight can't go there. But I know my opponent's made a mistake. It's in the book. It's in the book. Queen d2 question mark. So realizing my knight can't move, I played the obvious, by process of elimination, I mean to say, takes here. So I took the pawn. So at this point, you know, Matthew goes into a deep think, right? A deep think. So this gives me the time I need to finish my second cup of coffee, get 2 donuts, the sugar kicks in, man. And suddenly, I realize I'm dead lost. Like dead lost. Dead lost. Wow. And no matter how I try to flip the pieces in my mind, I can't escape the fact I'm lost. And I mean, this is like a cold discovery. I mean, you're like, oh, I'm chilled to the bone. I realize, and this is very, obviously the position's very complex. The pieces are hanging everywhere. This guy's hanging, that guy's hanging, that guy's hanging. How do you calculate the victory for white? Or even put another way, how do you calculate period? Okay? So what's your first in the order of calculation? Your first thing is always checks. You always look at checks first. Well, it's white to move, and he can't give me check, so there's no checks. The second thing is if there's no checks, you always look at captures first. Obviously, white could capture this pawn, but that's not the capture you're interested. You got to capture the pieces that have the greatest value. So the very first move white should calculate is to take the knight, and that's the winning move, is to take this knight. Obviously, I'm a piece down. I gotta get my piece back. I'm going to take his knight. Okay. Now here you have to think for a moment, and this is actually kind of a difficult thing for white to see. It's easy for white to reject this variation because he sees that this pawn is about to take this bishop with a check, and if the bishop takes the pawn, bishop takes e2, well, that gives me the moment I need to be able to move my knight out of danger. I can play knight f7, amongst other things. White could take this pawn, bishop takes, same thing, I'll move my knight, and I'll be fine. What white needed to conceive is look at black's queen for a moment. Black's queen has a very limited number of squares, thanks to the peculiar situation of the pawn on c6. If white makes the move bishop g5, uh-oh, my queen's trapped. If I take the bishop, rook would recapture, my queen's trapped. I have no choice. I must play the move bishop f6 to avoid my queen being trapped. White captures the bishop. Again, I have no time to capture the bishop on f1 with check, because then my queen would be trapped. I must instead capture the bishop, and then my knight is captured. Well, I'm a piece down. I really have no option. I must capture. Capture. Now, where does my queen go? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. If my queen were to retreat to d8, well, after queen g7, I'm facing the threat of queen f7 checkmate, as well as queen takes h8. I can resign. If I move my queen to e7, well, this is refuted by the natural knight d5. I mean, just, like, nightmares indeed, right? Nightmares indeed. So in this position, of course, I have to block the rook's attack with the move bishop f5. Now again, I saw this whole variation and I'm playing with it in my mind, and no matter how I played with it, I just couldn't avoid this. He would take on b7, I'd play rook b8, and here white has the obvious g4. I'm losing a piece, but it's worse than that. Rook takes. You could take on f5 and you're winning. That's not disputing that. But then I might play rook takes b2. But white has a real pow move. Rook takes f5. Oh, no! Oh, no! Not only does he win a piece, he wins a piece with tempo, and he's attacking, and he's got everything. And I'm totally shellacked. Let's go back for a moment and see how that happened again, because it's really, oops, d5. D5. E takes f3. So here's the key moment. He should take my knight. I'll take his knight. He should play bishop here, and this is how he wins. Oops, pardon me. This is how he wins the game. Bishop takes g4, and so forth. So again, I was desperately trying to avoid this, oops, to avoid this line. And much to my great surprise, my opponent didn't take my knight, but instead played knight g3. Now, I was so relieved that he didn't take my knight, which wins the game, that I almost wanted to shout out, Yahoo! But the more I looked at the position, I thought, geez, this is winning too. I didn't even consider this move. Now, both my knights are hanging. I no longer have this queen h4 check to recover my knight. So it's like, like I'm losing here as well. I played the move knight d4, fully expecting that after bishop takes, queen takes, check, king here, take the rook, take the pawn, queen here, bishop here, I'd be lost. That is to say, I can't save my knight on a1. White would have two pieces for the rook, but even worse from my point of view, he has domination of this e4 square. One of his knights one day is going to park itself on e4, and I'm dead. I mean, okay, I will fight, of course, but it's a one-sided battle. White is simply winning. So I expected that variation, and instead Michael found a finesse. He played the move bishop g5. So he wants the variation I just showed you, but he wants me to put my queen on this embarrassing square d7, so that after queen d7 I'm blocking my bishop, and it's even worse for me than the variation I've showed you. I, of course, played queen takes, knight here. So in this case, I've sacrificed my queen for a single bishop. Not two pieces, not three pieces, a single bishop. And I was elated. I was super happy with myself. Why? Well, first of all, it seemed like everybody in the tournament hall, through the powers of osmosis, realized that I'm lost, a queen off the board. They all came up to Michael and well done, go get him, you're gonna win your game. And Michael's like, I'll do my best. So first he's dealing with that. Second of all, I knew I was dead lost 2 moves before. Like if he had taken my knight, now I got a chance, right? The third thing that was going on in my mind is the position itself. One of the things that happens is, like, when we win material, a queen, or for something, or a rook or something, our first instinct is to consolidate, to save the fact that this is mine, I want to keep it. And so what is going on in Michael's mind is that he's facing this very unpleasant bishop h6. So for example, if he drops back with his queen, and you're just going to love this variation, I attack his queen with bishop h6. He drops back, checkmate. Like, what? There's a queen up there. So how about if the queen were to go here? Well, then I have check, 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 check. What is this, some kind of a wipeout? Like, what the heck is going on? Let's say he moves his king, bishop, knight, check, check. Wait a minute, I started with a 1 bishop for a queen, and I got 2 bishops, 2 knights, and he's still in check. He's going to lose his queen anyway. So those variations of checkmate and this windmill tactic are scaring Darby to death while he's receiving congratulations of all of the players in the tournament hall, because they're all looking at what's off the board and not what's on the board. My opponent played knight ge4, and I gave him a check, and he didn't want to go to this file, to this diagonal, I beg your pardon, because then I'm going to take his rook, and so he moved his king here. I played check. He didn't want to go to the diagonal as before, because that's a very unusual discovered check on the queen, and white would have to give up his queen for the bishop. Queen takes. But in this case, I'm a pawn up. Yay! So he played his king, pardon me, after this check, he played his king here. I went bishop here, attacking his queen. He went queen here. I took. The rook came there. I took. The rook came here. And here we shook hands. As we were shaking hands, the people in the tournament hall came over to shake his hand, thinking he had won, right? They were shocked when I said, no, I won the game. Because again, they were just so focused on what came off the board.